there, chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we're in the Emilia region of Italy riding the Parma foothills. This route is available on Rouvy, so let's get right to it. This is a moderate length route at a bit over 33 kilometers long, with a medium amount of elevation gain at 563 meters. The whole ride averages just 2%, but will max out at 16%. There are 2 Strava segments included on the route, but there are 3 to 4 climbs overall. The first segment is Barbiano. It's at the 9 kilometer mark, is 3 kilometers long with 174 meters of elevation gain. The segment averages 5.2% and will peak at 14%. Strava considers this a Cat 4 climb. This is a bit of a weird climb in that it's 2 parts split by a shallow downhill, and both uphill bits have quite a bit of variation in them. The first half varies from 2 to 3% to then a couple hundred meters of 9 to 10% plus. The steepest bit of the climb is in the middle section of the first half. After the slight downhill in the middle, the rest is fairly consistent over 8%. It's a bit of a strange climb, but then there is a nice descent of almost 3 kilometers plus about 6 kilometers of flat. The second climb doesn't have a segment, and it's a little tough to tell when exactly it begins. There are several little blips of an uphill-downhill combo before you get a steady uphill. They're pretty mild and peak at about 8%. We'll say the climb starts in earnest at about the 22.5 kilometer mark. It's about 3 kilometers long with 133 meters of elevation gain. Some quick gradient math tells us it averages 4.4%, with the max gradient of 16%. For the first 2 kilometers of this climb, the gradients are really mild, maxing out at about 8%, but then you come around a corner and it's 10% plus for about 300 meters. There's another nice approximate 4 kilometers of descent and flat before getting to the third hill. It's at the 29.3 kilometer mark, is only about 700 meters long, and has 51 meters of elevation gain. The gradient math says it averages 7.3%, and it will again max out at 16%. This is more of just an extended pinch, but it's pretty tough. There's a slight dip in the middle where the camera car turns off the paved road onto a barely used dirt path. There's not much to plan on this one as it's quite short, so just watch for it and plan your gear choices early as the gradients will hit almost immediately. The last Strava segment is Vizola. It's at the 31 kilometer mark, is 2.3 kilometers long with 86 meters of elevation gain. The segment averages 3.3% and peaks at 13%. The steepest part of this climb is right at the start, and from there it's really mild until almost the end, where it does again see almost 10%. The segment and route end on a slight uphill, which is super awkward and really not that great. But this is a segment where you've got a nice flattish lead into it and the steepest bit right at the start. From there it's pretty easy and not that big of a deal to push this one pretty hard. Now for this ride, you'll want a medium sort of warm-up. The first 9 kilometers are pretty mild, so you don't really need to spend heaps of time warming up. The ending is on that final hill, and it does stop on about 6.5%, so you'll definitely be needing a good cool down for this one. As always, I recommend pre-fueling your rides, including plenty of protein. This one is more of a medium elevation gain, so pre-fueling isn't as critical. There's plenty of time at the start to have some food, and if you can't pre-fuel, have about 10 to 15 grams in that long flat before the first climb. The earlier the better. The nice long downhill and flat before the second climb is a good spot for another 10 to 15 grams. The last section to the end isn't very long or difficult, and faster acting carbs for the climb is a better choice here. You don't need heaps for it, so be careful not to overfuel this one. And at over 500 meters of elevation gain, I would still go for a post-ride protein of some sort and a magnesium supplement. Even more important if you've pushed it pretty hard. The view on this ride is pretty interesting. There's a lot of fields, single-lane roads with enclosed trees, small villages, and then that weird deviation off into paths unridden. It looks like it was autumn when this was recorded, so there's plenty of variation in the tree color, which makes for a nice change of pace. The more urban areas aren't that great, but once you're back into the countryside, there's some pretty epic views of distant mountains. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you all know how much I love mountain views. For this ride, a medium pace saw me complete it in just under 1.5 hours. With only needing a short warm-up but needing a longer cooldown, I would say to budget anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 hours depending on how much you like climbing. If you are a newer climber, be sure to budget a little bit of extra time. Overall, this is a great medium kind of ride. Medium distance, medium elevation gain, medium time needed. It's a really good choice for those wanting to up their elevation gains without being too much. The downhills and flat that surround all the climbs make it both quite friendly and pretty horrible. It does give you plenty of time to be warm and ready for the climb, but it also means that the elevation is all packed into the 3 hills instead of spread out more evenly. I personally enjoy this style, but it's something to be aware of before going into the ride. It also makes the route quite friendly for stopping and picking up again if you don't have time to complete it all in one go. For this route, I would give a 4 out of 5. This is a good weird route, lots of variation in terrain and in what you see. For the climbs, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, and 3 out of 5. The first 2 climbs are pretty similar overall. The pinch is pretty taxing simply because it goes hard from start to finish. And the last climb is nice in that the hardest bit is right at the start and gets easier from there. On the whole, nothing too extreme in either way. For the view, 4 out of 5. The countryside views are fabulous and the colors of the trees are great and the distant mountains are beautiful, but the cityscapes feel like they bring the whole thing down a bit. And overall, 4.5 out of 5. This is a really great middle-of-the-road kind of climbing route. It's a good transitionary ride for those wanting to up their elevation gains. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, Chipmunks. Please let me know what you think of the Parma Foothills route when you complete it. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the ride, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, Chipmunks, ride on.